We are back to 100% dry brushing, and we are attempting to paint the flesh of this guy in 90 minutes. All right, so we have returned 100% D. This is all dry brushed. Fantastic level we've got on that, and I set myself the pretty aggressive target of doing all of that in 90 minutes. I've used 2 brushes, I've used like 6 paints, plenty of stages, but they're all really fast, they're all really fun, and this is straight up award-winning army level, not like you're entering Golden Demon, but award-winning army level. This done across like an army, which is like absolutely phenomenal. Based correctly, it'd stand out, and you're not going to miss this. Whatever room you walk into, dark table, light table, yellow light, white light, whatever it is, outside, inside, that is just going to pop because of the fluorescent paints. And you've got that lovely kind of contrasting purple down below in our kind of TM ghost wall scheme. So it's really, really good, looks really, really amazing, stands out next to whatever you put it next to, and it's fun. That's the most important thing, so let's crack on. Okay, so before I start, I wanted to take you through a couple of things. Number one, your undercoat. Please undercoat from a can here. We're going to be doing quite a lot of stages of dry brushing, and even though it is a pretty blobby, round, smooth model, there are a lot of little lips. So if I can get this better in camera. So areas like this are real perfect recipients for knocking your dry brushing back to your undercoat or your previous stage. And if you have got something that isn't a proper undercoat from a can, you've got a better bond, so you're not as likely to knock it down back to the black or back to the plastic or something like that. So even if you're just giving it a light spray undercoat and then going in with an airbrush or a normal brush to catch the recesses, do give it a proper prime from a can. Look at him, we're gonna have fun with that, aren't we? The brushes we're using, this is an ancient large, it's actually shrunk a bit, you can see, but they age beautifully. This is an ancient large. This is one of the first batch we had of like kind of our final Series D run when we refined the kind of the process and the makeup of them. It's got a little bit shorter, that's fine. We're using a smaller one for the base coating and the pre-shading because it can get in the recesses. Even though that seems a little bit back to front, and then we'll be using the large one, the extra large, for the highlights. So for the stuff where we need to get into the nooks and crannies, even though it's a base coat, we're using a smaller brush, and then we're using a larger brush for the highlights. May sound a little bit weird and unusual, but trust me, it's gonna look awesome. Let's get this dampening pad ready, hit the timer, and go. My prediction is 70 to 80 minutes on this. If I can do it in less, that's awesome. We'll see how it goes though. I have got faster since the last one of these I painted. All right. So on our palette, we have Xeris Purple and Huldra Brew. I'm sure that will surprise everyone quite a lot, or not. All right. We're off, let's go. So for our first step, we're just gonna be getting Huldra Blue in all the recesses, mixing a little bit of purple in there, but not too much. And this is not here to be precise at all. All of this is going to be done by volume, so essentially if it is facing down, it should be blue, and then we'll go purple, green, and we'll work our way up like that. 7 minutes in, we're doing okay. So the blue's been hit from below. You can't really see this massively at this stage, but it's important to me that those recesses are cool rather than warm. It's just a big part of what we're looking to achieve. So I continue with my poor abused brush, and we're going to mix up a large proportion of the Xeris Purple. Now essentially we're just taking any areas that we've hit with the blue, we're now fading the purple in and working our way up a little bit. Don't take this too high, but if you do, don't worry about it, because we're going to be hitting it with a couple more layers up these volumes anyway, so anywhere where you go too far, you can just cover it with your next stage basically. So working up with pure Xeris Purple now. As I said, we're going to be stippling, kind of fading into the previous layer, but we're also, once we've done the stippling, remember to take the dry brushing down the model, because we want to be getting an overall impression of brightening, but also a texture-based impression of things kind of stepping up in terms of their level of color. Okay, so we've gone through a load of our transitions. It is now time to jump to the shading. 22 minutes in, this is the slower bit. We're kind of laying foundations, and then as soon as we bring out the brighter colors, which we're about to do, things should speed up. So just got some white here. It doesn't really matter which one, just pick your favorite. And I'm using the XL. Now, as normal, for any of you that followed my dry brushing on the channel before, we're going to be starting the place we want to be the brightest. And then working our way down. So the idea with this is that any kind of heavy-handed strokes that we have, they're going to land in an area that's meant to be super bright anyway. And then we will work our way down the model for the rest of it. This is where you'll start seeing magic happen, hopefully. Even kind of just pretty much in grayscale, it should become pretty evident what the idea and focus is of what we're doing and how we're looking to achieve it. So still do go down to the kind of the lower areas of the volume. So if I use the arm as an example, you still do want to be going down and hitting these underhanging folds, but just hit them a little bit less and build up your stages a little bit here. Probably 2 layers is what I'm going to do. I'll do one all over lightly, and then the second one will land a bit more easily on top of it, and the second one I will concentrate on a smaller area, more upward facing. Okay, so here he is. That's taken quite a while. We're up to 35 minutes, but pretty much the entire thing has been hit with volume-based dry brushing. It is really important to do the light stage first, the initial one, and then do the other stage afterwards. Paint lands better on its own type of paint. So particularly given that these upper facing areas, they just had black primer on and nothing else, we've been hitting it from below, it's really important to lay a light foundation, and then your second step will land much more smoothly and predictably rather than like smeary. So if you try and do too much at once, you'll get an area like this that looks a bit pap. And if you do it carefully, you'll get an area like this that looks awesome. We've got spring green from scale, and then we've got boreal tree green from scale. I'm going to be mixing them in together, involving a little bit of the purple, perhaps in the first stage of this, but essentially we are just about to kind of step things up and continue our process that we already began. I'm going to be doing more of this with dry brushing rather than stippling. So we've kind of left the stippling behind at this point. The major thing is that we need to cover anywhere that is white. So it's kind of nice to have a little slightly helpful kind of rule of thumb in there. A little bit of that purple. The purple turns this green into like a somewhat like aquatic color, absolutely lovely. And then all these downwards facing areas, you want to get the lot. So just same principles that we used before, downwards facing. If you've got a fold, you should be going up and down over the fold. You can try and hit it from top to bottom, but as I said, the most important aspect of this is that we really need to be covering anywhere that is white. So same principles as the white really here in terms of the pressure. I've got a little bit of it on my brush, but I am covering the lot, like the entirety. And all of these are going to be predominantly our downward facing areas. Because it's going over the white, what that's going to unlock for us, especially if we use the dampening pad, is you can use a really soft touch. And this is important for a number of reasons. Number one, it's going to be smooth and beautiful, which is obviously very, very important. Number two, it's just way faster. If we were trying to force this to work over the dark purple, it'd really be giving us kind of a load of kickback and difficulty, but we're not, so it's behaving itself. So exactly the same as the purple, all with dry brushing. We're taking this from the lower areas, and we're going to go like roughly, if you want a proportion, we're going to maybe a third of the way up on all of the rounded volumes. Okay, so these steps have really sped up now. As I said, that white is just making it much easier to land these colors more successfully. So just the same as we were before, but with dry brushing. So it's a very easy step, because what you do with your stippling, like 1, 2, 3, blue through to purple, you do with your greens. So like purpley green, this lovely aqua-y, whatever it is, sea-hued, purple, green, blue, whatever. That from the bottom, a bit more of the pure green, add this green, add fluorescence, go, and then we just work our way up the volumes for each stage. So go for some more pure green now. I think at this stage we will just introduce our fluorescent, at least to our palette. It's there, we've got the option. We do want to save this for the upper facing parts, but it's there ready for when we need it. So if you notice, I'm taking my paints from the side quite carefully, I'm really working them into the brush. Some of them are like, my spring green is quite a wet one, so you're just got to be mindful of that. And then not going a huge distance up from where we were, and kind of working our way down into the layers we just did, and then over them kind of overall we're dry brushing, just working our way up from where we were. So this all over. The reason I'm introducing this is because we need a paint that covers. And if you're using kind of semi-transparent paints, being this, which is very, very transparent, or spring green, which seems to be surprisingly transparent, you need something to kind of make the paint bite and catch and land on the model more easily. Otherwise, you're just putting a filter down. Over complete white at the top, that's absolutely fine, but that's not quite how we want it to behave. So I'm going to be introducing the ice yellow into the mix a tiny bit, just to make our lives a little bit easier. Taking some of the spring green, and then also a tiddy tad of the fluorescent. We're not going to be going over the top with the fluorescent. Yeah, like I said, we're saving that for the top. And what we will do is we'll probably end up bouncing backwards and forwards between our paints and our pre-shade a couple of times, just to really kind of ramp up the contrast. Keep going back to your dampening pad. We're doing a fair few stages on this dude, and it's important not to be working with nasty claggy paint or a upset brush. This brush is doing a lot of stages. It's kind of it speaks to the quality of them that it's going now. Like it's got a fair bit of paint on it. It's had a lot of traffic on it, and because we're using the dampening pad, that's what allows us to kind of keep going with the same one. And it means that rather than adding more paint, you're helping it exit onto the model, and you're keeping it smooth and a load of other helpful stuff. As I've said a lot, make sure any areas you're covering, no matter what stage it is, you need to be covering all of the white over. Until the very final stages, that is absolutely essential. "53 minutes in, not doing too badly. Beginning to build up the shapes. Now this guy is looking a little bit drab, so we're going to be jumping into the realms of kind of hyper pushing all of the areas of contrast. We're still going to add ice yellow into our previous mix for this step, but after that we're going to bring in the pre-highlighting again, the white, and that's going to really help us. So exact same principles as our initial white pre-shade, and you can already see what this is doing. Look at that. We start getting the kind of cheaty magic steps going in. We may as well put a little bit of fluoro green into this, and just anywhere where we were doing our white pre-shade, if it's facing upwards, it gets dry brushed first and then fade it down into the areas below. So again, we don't want, I know we're going to hit it with white again, but the idea is this is going to build a foundation, and then the next white stage is going to kind of enhance that. So anything that is white needs to be covered by this, like absolutely anything. Just past the hour mark, really starting to take shape, looking pretty sweet, but it's turbo time. So we've got our white, nothing complex here. It is pretty much exactly the same as our first white, but we're just doing it lighter, and we're specifically concentrating on areas that we want to be highlighted. So I'm going to remove a little bit of the excess from the previous stage off my brush. Don't have to be too precise about this, but it's just good practice. Half the reason that you have a texture palette is to help with cleaning as well as your other stuff. And make sure those bristles are not dry. Let's go. So I'm just using the same area of my palette. I'm not being obsessive about making sure it's the pure white that's ever been. test it somewhere else. We don't want any streaking. And then all these top facing areas are going to get a bit of TLC. So this will have an interesting effect on the model. We've still got some of our previous colors there, which mitigates it a bit, but because we're just going at it with white, the model will get brighter but more dull. And what I mean by that is it's going to get to be a lighter color, but it's going to be less a lighter tone or shade rather, but it's going to be less colorful because we're kind of drowning out those big bold fluorescents or whatever. So don't get it all the way down the areas you're looking to get, but do give them a fair bit of TLC and take your time here. Oh, there we go. We've already gone an incredibly we've gone an incredible distance in an hour already. To get the flesh done on something of this size in a manual way without an airbrush or spray cans or something like that, start to finish, is pretty nuts. So don't feel any massive need to like speed up even further. I mean, if someone can do the entire model in 90 minutes, flesh and everything else, very impressive. But spending 20 more minutes here, you'll really reap the dividends of. So just as before, going over the upwards facing areas, all of the ones that we hit in our first step, and perhaps if you've learned about the model and you've realized you've missed out the hands, which I always do, for example, you can kind of remedy that a little bit in this step. The top of the model is getting quite tacky because of the fluorescent paint, so as I mentioned before, you can either be careful with it or hairdry it. Either one of those is absolutely fine. Getting there, getting close to our 18-minute aim. You might have noticed on any of the time lapses, I spend a lot of time taking my brush to areas of the palette that don't seem to make sense. So for example, that's what I'm doing there is I'll just go to the dampening pad and then work off excess on my brush. So what we have here is exactly what we said, getting lighter in these sections, and it's just a matter of us stepping things up and jump into our fluorescent colors now. So this will make a really big difference pretty much instantly. So fingers crossed. So grabbing some of our fluoro green. As I've mentioned before, we need something to make this stick and hold, and in this case that is ice yellow. We've left our green behind. Put a little bit in if you wanted, entirely up to you. So the ice yellow is quite a desaturated, it's just a hint of being off the grayscale, but given that we've countered it with the ridiculousness, which is fluorescent green, we should really see some massive benefits to it. So covering those white areas and then taking our dry brushing down the model. We don't want to obscure our previous stages of work too much, so take a little bit of care, and then just those upward facing areas hit as we have been with previous stages. Do go back to your dampening pad and kind of help make the paint a little bit more subtle, but this all over the model. All right, so same again, won't repeat myself, we're just going to step through to the next obvious step, which is another quick pre-shade. Again, it's going to be lighter. With the white, hitting the very tops of the areas we just hit with that fluoro step, and then we're going to be adding the fluorescent yellow into the mix. Now this is kind of the final color in our sequence, but it doesn't have to be the final color in your sequence of painting the model. You can go backwards and forwards with these steps as much as you want. So if you want to carry on going in there with a white and a fluoro and a white and a fluoro in a ever shrinking area, that'll have quite a nice effect, and you'll get a really kind of awesome transition up to an incredibly bright color. We're keeping it for the purposes of kind of trying to hit our 90-minute cap that I've been aiming for, or less if at all possible. I'm just specifically going to stop fairly shortly.
We also do have to be mindful, we've built up a lot of stages. We've been using our dampening pad to kind of mitigate the issues that come as part and parcel of that. But if you put this many layers on a model, you do start, you run the risk of caking and obscuring texture and stuff like that. So being mindful of that and trying to avoid it. But yeah, we've hit it with the white all over, which I'll just finish off, and then we can jump in with our turbo yellows. So through to our next step. Now we do need to be a little bit careful with this. So fluoro yellow, fluoro green. This color is nuts, like potentially too nuts. So it's gonna get knocked back with some of the ice yellow. And I'm gonna be removing a lot of it and really making sure that when it does get taken to the model, it's getting taken there with caution. So all these upward facing areas, again with that, careful where you brace it. I've said it multiple times, but having fluoros in, they are sticky paints. They are a bit more gel-like. They take longer to dry. So I'm gonna hit it all over with this, and then we'll add a little bit of white, and that will pretty much be the model done. So here we are, just under our 90-minute aim. Really pleased with that. I would have perhaps, the stippling stages I did beforehand, maybe I would have taken them up a little bit further and transitioned into green, I think more, and also maybe I would have kept the purple more evident by doing a heavier coat of it going up further, because we're going to cover up so much of it anyway. But overall, really pleased with it. Very effective. I mean, 90 minutes for that many stages is phenomenal. Brush is still going strong. Just remember to keep going back to your dampening pad. You can see this texture palette was black, and I've pretty much shaded it in entirely, just cleaning my brush, never mind my area over here. He's looking really effective. For 90 minutes, that is absolutely brilliant. And probably within another 90 minutes, you could have the miniature finished. Just a note, this is only held in by friction, so any details like that, if you have an option to not glue them, it doesn't hurt not to, and then you can make things a little bit more convenient for you at future stages.
So we managed it just about in 90 minutes. He looks brilliant. Obviously we've not got contrast from his weapon or the horns or his disgusting bits, well, the other disgusting bits anyway, but he's brilliant. Really, really good. It's a really, really fun process. Turned out amazingly well. And as I said in the intro, it's just any army done to this standard would be absolutely incredible. You can pick out like a deep blue basing or something like that, or grey, just to let the miniatures do the talking. Either way, it looked really, really good. So if you've got any questions about the process, the products, anything like that, do pop them below, and pop your suggestions below as well. If you want me to see me go through all the greater demons, let me know. If you're happy that we've returned to the big guys, I mean, we've chosen a very big guy. We've been doing infantry a bit more recently. Just let us know what you'd like to see coming, and also your thoughts for how you would go about this, maybe how you paint the weapons, anything like that. We do love you getting involved, and we're doing things like this because of mass requests for future tutorials. We've got a salamander coming up fairly soon. That's been hugely requested, and we're probably also going to be delving more into conventional flesh, being not bright green glowing flesh.